Whenever we utter the word disaster management, what comes to your mind first? Perhaps lifeboats in flood? Or whenever we utter the word security, perhaps the images of fighter planes or tanks at borders would flash in front of your eyes. Many of the times, we treat security and disaster management as two different worlds, two different budgets, and two different mentalities. But what if I told you that in the 21st century, this distinction between security and disaster management is not just outdated, it is going to be very dangerous. When a glacial lake bursts in Sikkim, it does not just destroy the nearby villages, it wipes out the strategic bridges and cuts off the military supply lines to the Indian Armed Forces Jawans. Whenever a cyclone hits our eastern coast, it tests the resilience of our Indian naval assets over there. In India, a disaster is not just a humanitarian crisis. In reality, it's a security breach. Today, we are going to analyze the security disaster nexus, why India must integrate these two pillars to survive the age of permanent crisis. Traditionally, the concept of security was about state versus state conflict. That means a country is fighting against another country. But in reality, today, we face threats without borders. The kind of threats they have changed from conventional threats to the non-conventional threats. That's why these threats without borders, they become very important. Disasters are force multipliers. They take existing vulnerabilities, like for example poverty, say infrastructure gaps or geographical isolation, and these vulnerabilities, the other country, they weaponize these things against the enemy nation. For a country like India, with 15,000 kilometers of land border and 7,500 kilometers of coastline, the environment is our second front line. Think about it. A major earthquake in a disputed border region is not just a rescue mission for India, but in a way, it's a race for strategic presence. The first responder in such kind of situation often dictates the influence in that sensitive zone, in that strategic zone. So why is this very special or very critical for India? Let's discuss about the Himalayan fragility. Our borders with China and Pakistan, they sit on the world's most ecologically volatile terrain. Climate induced disasters here are not acts of God, they are in real sense strategic risks. A landslide that blocks a highway for 3 to 5 days can shift the balance of power during that particular standoff. Let's discuss about the another aspect, that is maritime security. Our blue economy, coastal economy, it is the backbone of our Indian future. But with increasing cyclonic intensity in the Arabian Sea as well as Bay of Bengal, our coastal energy installations and our Indian naval bases, they are under constant environmental siege. The third factor which we have to take into consideration is the convergence of cyber and physical aspects. Imagine a disaster, a massive flood in Mumbai. Simultaneously, if it is hit by a cyber attack, or say a kind of cyber attack on critical infrastructure, or say cyber attack on the power grid, what will happen? That is what the real hybrid warfare is. If our disaster response is not security hardened, we are going to be very vulnerable. And to manage this, we need to shift from reactive relief approach to strategic resilience. This requires a comprehensive framework, what I call it as PREPARE, that is prepare mindset for disaster management. It is my signature framework for disaster management. Let's discuss in short about this prepare mindset. P is for proactive intelligence. Using the satellite imagery and artificial intelligence, it is not just for the troop movements or the soldiers movements, but it can be used for predictive disaster modeling. That is P for predictive or proactive intelligence. R is for resource optimization. ensuring the military's heavy lift capabilities and National Disaster Response Force, that means NDRF's specialized skills, they are the part of a single unified command structure. E is for essential infrastructure. Building the dual use infrastructure. That means a bridge in Arunachal Pradesh must be strong enough for T20, T90 tank, and it should be resilient enough to withstand a flash flood also. Next P is for public-private synergy. Engaging the corporate sector in logistics and supply chain security becomes very, very important. Next A is for adaptive policy. Updating our national security doctrine to include the ecological security is very important. Next is R. R is for regional leadership. India acting as the net security provider in IOR, that means Indian Ocean region, by leading disaster response for our neighbors becomes very important if India wants to emerge as the superpower. If in real sense India wants to become the net security provider in Indian Ocean region. And last is E, and that E is empowerment, training the last man at the last mile. The line between the soldier and rescue worker is blurring day by day. We saw this during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a biological disaster that required a military grade logistical response so as to tackle that particular situation. You must be remembering that 2020 to almost 2023, how the whole world dealt with that particular pandemic, and that too, as far as India's response is concerned, it was phenomenal, but that phenomenal response was of military grade logistical response. The future of Indian defense lies in civil military fusion. We need integrated theater commands that don't just look at the enemy formations but at the terrain intelligence. We need leaders who understand that a failing dam or a kind of falling dam is as much a threat to the national stability as a rogue drone attacking on your critical infrastructure. Security of a nation is no longer just about guarding the gates, it is about ensuring the house can withstand the storm. India is at its crossroads. We can continue to treat these as separate silos, or we can build a resilient superpower. This is very important. So, what do you think? Is India's current disaster management framework robust enough to handle a security crisis? Or do we need a dedicated environmental security wing in our armed forces? Think seriously. Let's discuss all these things in the comments. If you found this analysis thought-provoking, hit that like button and subscribe the channel Military Mentor Dr. Satish for more deep dives into the strategy and security. Stay alert, stay resilient. Thank you. Jai Hind.